welcome tonight to our Fall 2017 Community Lecture. We're so pleased you could join us on this stormy night, and thank you for weathering the weather. I'd like to say a special thank you to our students and faculty and colleagues who are here tonight. A special welcome to our guest speakers, Geisdorff and Dr. Melissa Moreno. A special thank you to our community sponsors, Chicken Ranch Rancheria, Me-Wuk Indians of California, and Black Oak Casino Resort. Thanks also to my fellow Foundation board members who are here, a dedicated, enthusiastic group. And would you just please wave if you're a Foundation board member? There are still some outside, I think. And to all of you who are taking time to join us. Our foundation, now in its 45th year, exists to support student success at Columbia College and to connect the college and the community. We work with the community to raise funds for scholarships, campus improvements, and to meet the educational needs at the college and in the community. We hope you've heard about our work. We've got some exciting projects going on right now that I want to tell you about, including our new Columbia Promise campaign for local high school students, launching in fall of 2018. Anniversary of the college, and we couldn't be more proud. There's information available if you want to. This isn't about the Columbia Promise tonight, so I'm not going to speak more about it, but there's information on one of the back tables. And another Columbia Foundation program is our community lecture series. It's another important part of our mission to connect the college and the community. We're proud to partner with our talented college faculty and staff to bring you a variety of interesting and enlightening programs. Tonight is a great example, the experience of California Native Americans today. We're in, I know, for an engaging evening that we hope builds awareness and understanding. With all that, I'll turn this over to our moderator, a new faculty member and counselor at Columbia College, and a talented, engaging, and inspiring young educator, Stephanie Beaver.
Hey young, Ayikwi. Hello and good evening. I want to thank you for taking time to be here tonight. I'm honored that you all made the effort to be here. My name is Stephanie Beaver. I'm a counselor here at Columbia College. I'm a Hupa tribal member. My father is Hupa and Yurok. My mom is Irish. These are two tribes in the northernmost part of California in Humboldt County. And our agenda tonight is noted in the program, and I was asked to share a brief overview of what's in store for you and share a little bit about my own experiences. So first I'll kind of dive into things briefly, and then we'll hear from our two guest speakers, Dr. Melissa Moreno and Geisdorff. Then we'll transition and open it up for a brief period of questions. So with this, my brief story in a nutshell, but before I get started, I notice we have some people in the back. If you'd like to come forward, we still have plenty of seats up here. And even if you don't want to make that climb to the front of the room, people won't be paying attention. So if you want to make yourself comfortable, there's plenty of seats on either side. And if anyone's looking for the restroom, I believe they are outside of the building and around to the side over here. So the California Native American experience. That's very broad, and you all are curious or interested, or students seeking extra credit, so you're here. But I want to help kind of frame what that is by sharing my own experience. And my experience does not speak for everyone, of course, but it is definitely mine, and to help kind of give some insight to many of the different issues that can impact Native people. So like I said, I was born and raised in Hupa on the reservation up there in Humboldt County. And like many of my friends and cousins in my community, I have labels that definitely described part of my experience. Low income, first generation student, who had no idea if I would get through high school, let alone if college was even in my future. I had spent my childhood bouncing between relatives as I had been in the foster care system, and I was raised by most of my relatives. Like many in my community, I was no stranger to the impact and seeing the wreckage of domestic violence, sexual and domestic assault, the impact of substance abuse and intergenerational trauma. I left home when I was 17 to go to college. Somehow I managed to leave my reservation and go to UC Davis. But even though I had always been a pretty good student, I found myself incredibly underprepared, struggling, and experiencing the biggest culture shock I had never even imagined. I ended up getting kicked out of school and told I was not college material. That's the reason why I'm the counselor today. But in that experience, getting kicked out of school, I found myself at a community college, at Woodland Community College, where Dr. Moreno is a teacher at. And I learned this system and how to navigate. But it was a foreign place to me, especially coming from a very different world. And I struggled for years. And then I did re-enter UC Davis and graduated, and I went on to graduate school. And one thing that stood out the most to me, kind of reflecting upon this, is that I was constantly navigating between two very different worlds. And if you think about, some of you maybe are interested in college, maybe that's not your thing. But regardless, it is a system. And if you don't know the rules, and you don't know the values, or if your own experiences are a little bit different, how can you easily fit and do well? It didn't matter that I may be smart, or in some people's eyes, not college material. But I had to learn this new world, and I had to navigate a very Western way of thinking and doing things when I didn't fit in that mold. So kind of skipping over a lot of that decade of just trying to get my bachelor's degree. All of these experiences, even now, really highlight this going between two worlds. And whether or not you are from a reservation, or you're a native person living in a very urban area, or if you aren't even native, but you maybe have your own experience, if you have experienced social class mobility, if you're the first person in your family to go to college, and you can't really relate to those who come from a stream of people who've always gone to Harvard. There's different experiences of navigating between worlds that many of you may experience yourself. But for someone who's native, it is invasive and in our face in so many ways. In college, I experienced that, but even now, as a professional in higher education, I still experience this. And one of the most profound ways is when I constantly hear conversations about students at risk, and different ethnic groups are always discussed and brought up, but are Native American people ever even brought to the conversation? Sometimes we're left off of admission statistics because we are less than 1%. So does that mean we are not significant? Because we are living on reservations or not visibly in public, or people think that we are Hispanic, or that we're white because we don't look what someone thinks we are supposed to look like. We are dismissed and not included in conversations, in statistics, in programs. There are exceptions, of course. But how would it feel to never have your voice heard? To have no one ask you about your voice? To have your history completely ignored? In this culture that romanticizes our history or our experience, but does not value it and does not give us a voice or space, I am so excited that at least tonight, in an institution that is incredibly westernized, we have this space. We have a chance to share our voice and our perspectives. And what you will hear tonight is not a blanket statement, just like my own experience as being a biracial Native woman who looks white. You will hear there's over 500 different nations of Native people in what is the United States of America, not counting First Nations people and other indigenous groups all over Central and South America and Mexico. Whose histories have you heard? Whose histories have you not considered? In an area where certain histories are celebrated and others have no voice or perspective, I invite all of you tonight to consider any of your own assumptions, your own perceptions, and just be open to hearing something new. Knowing history doesn't just help us not repeat those atrocities of the past, but provides lessons and insight so that we can shape a profound future together. I hope that tonight you will learn that why history of the past isn't just a thing of the past, but continues to impact us today. That you receive these different perspectives, that you will see that there is so much to the Native experience, and consider how you play a role. invite Melissa. She'd like to come up first, and then we'll have Carlos after that. And then of course I'll jump in after that and transition again to the questions. So if you have any questions you'd like to have, just make a note for yourself, and we'll have some time at the end.
So thank you, Counselor Stephanie Beaver, Columbia College Foundation, the Administration Assistant Kimberly DeFont, President Angela Fairchild, who was my former president, Chicken Ranch Casino, Tuolumne Band of Me-Wuk, and Black Gold Casinos, and all the students who are here, and all the families and all the relatives who are here. I'm really honored to have this invitation to be here. And so tonight, I've come to learn that it's important to do this work in spirit from others, from the past and the present and the future. And so I dedicate this presentation to all our relations and our future educators of Native American Studies. And I greet this homeland to honor the first stewards of this land, who in many ways prepared this land for many lessons and lessons that some of us are receiving tonight and or in the future. So tonight I want to talk just a little bit about my journey in becoming a Native American Studies faculty and teaching in that area, and then also how ecology, historical, and today's experiences shape the Native American experience altogether. So first of all, like many, my family migrated from the Southwest, from the Mesoamerican regions, descendants of Obanini, of Comanche people. We were disconnected from knowing the history of the first Americans, of the American Indians, of the region where I grew up, the region that is often called the San Joaquin Valley, the traditional homeland of Yokat. I grew up in this place, disconnected and miseducated about the history of the land. I didn't know about the history and the struggle of the people and this nation, this Native nation. And nor did I know that citizenship and access to courts had not been granted to Native Americans until 1924. So there was so much to learn in this journey. So after many years of preparing to become an ethnic studies faculty in various parts of California, as well as in the Ute homeland, I was blessed to be invited to come back and come to Wintun homeland of Patwin, and Patwin means people. And no one's telling me you can't see the slides. This is what I was talking about. So I grew up just about maybe 5 miles from these foothills, the Three Rocks. Tres Piedras. So this is where I grew up. This is where my first lessons came from, where my lessons of struggle and resilience came from. And then this is where I now reside. So how many California Indian territories can you name? Please say hi to the neighbor right now next to you that you don't know in less than a minute. Please share how many you know.
It's hard to start. But I do. Yora, Kara, Alone.
Okay, time. I think that was 30 seconds, right? Okay, are you ready?
We got him.
I know. Oh my gosh. I heard that when you say, oh my gosh. Yeah. So there's much to learn. There's much to learn, and so much diversity just within the California region. So in the California region, we have. So the California region has the most biodiversity, the most native cultural and language diversity. of all regions in North America and perhaps in our hemisphere. It is where I came to be grounded in Native studies. And then as you can see, there's 149 nations within California, out of the 567 that Councilor Beaver had just mentioned before. And as of 2013, 81 tribes petitioned for federal recognition. I think maybe less than 10 have actually been granted federal recognition. So the highest Native population is here in our region. And yet, it also, American Indians in the state of California also have the smallest amount of native land. I have to express gratitude to the elders and the relatives who have helped me to understand the importance of recognizing native homelands and the intertribal connections that we have, the importance of both native and non-native peoples engaging in healing from our own histories of intergenerational traumas or violence in our own histories, inter and intergroup violence. So in Wintun Homeland, this is where I came to learn about American Indian scholar Jack Forbes, the founder of UC Davis Native American Studies and also DQ University. And I was taught directly from his students and from his family. I actually moved into the community where he lived, I think a month after he crossed into the spirit world. And so all of these experiences came to prepare me to teach what became the first Native Studies class at my community college, Woodland Community College. So this course is meant to provide students and community members who take the class with an introduction of some of the basic concepts relating to Native American historical and political development. And I'm just so proud of this, of the students in the community for being able and willing to sustain the class, because you know if there's no students, there's no class. And so some of the readings in this class highlight the different hemispheric perspectives, including California through Native Eyes by Bauer. So what background information is useful to understand the California Native experience? There's different terms that we need to know exist in the hemisphere and in North America. And so throughout the hemisphere, there's various indigenous groups in South America, in the Caribbeans, in Mesoamerica, and in Canada, and also within the region that we call Alaska. The Alaska Native refers to native peoples of Alaska, and the Native American or native term is what we often hear. This term is used to refer to people who are native, but often it's used in limited ways to refer to people from the United States. Indian is a more common term that is used. However, this term is loaded. It has a lot of history, but it's also important to recognize in what context it's being used. So native was a term, as many of you know, that Columbus applied to the peoples of this hemisphere when he arrived to the Caribbean, and then was when he thought that he was in India. But it's also important to know that it's been claimed also or reclaimed by members and community members of the American Indian during the American Indian movement. Another term that we hear is indigenous, and this is an important term that drove the Declaration of indigenous people's rights has used, and it has to do with having a pre-colonial or historical continuity or distinct history, relationship to the land that we're living. So within North America, there are different groups, different tribes, and it's important to note and notice that the terms that are used for the groups are not the terms that the groups themselves have called themselves or even call themselves today. And so that's an important piece to keep in mind. And then also to recognize the diversity within North America. We have the 10 largest tribal groupings, and they're listed here. The Cherokee Nation and the people of this nation, as they were displaced in 1831, become a significant population in various states, including California. So in my Native Studies class, I have quite a few of the students who identify Cherokee or identify with the history or the heritage. And then the Dene and Choctaw, and then other groups too that are significant populations in North America. Also, it's important to note there's various regions, various reservations, and it is very political who decides if you're a real Indian or not a real Indian. There's a lot of politics around the federal recognition. There's also conversations that take place within groups as well, within Native groups in terms of tribal affiliation, and that's like a whole class lecture. So take your future Native Studies class. So it's important to note and notice that there's also creation or origin stories and histories that assert the specificity of people and place. And so rather than just say, let's look at the Native American experience, it's actually experiences, right? More than one experience. And usually people want to be referred by as close to the region that they're affiliated. So not even California Indian, but being more specific from the location. And also the creation stories or the origin stories also describe the territory, the relationship, the way that people are historically tied to the land. And then also these creation stories also disrupt some of the colonial stories about when the state of California begins, right? California is ancient. There's a lot of history, hundreds and hundreds of history that take place before 1850. And also these creation stories give a guidance on how to behave, the values, the norms, the beliefs, how to treat peoples as well as the ecology, and having a sense of responsibility in the ecology. It's an opportunity to re-examine our understandings to history. The land has a long history. The places and the names, that there are places that have names that refer to these stories and to the events in these stories. And I know that Carlos is going to give us a little bit more context specifically on how that applies to this particular community and the meanings here, and tell us something about how these places today, right, and how we're related to these places, and the highways, the routes, the paths that we use today are actually pre-existing trade routes that have connected these places long before. So many of the roads that we're using today were already ancient paths long ago. There's a quote here by one of the persons that Bowers interviews, and she says, "We are the makers of trails, and in our footsteps a civilization follows. Over our paths the traffic of a nation moves." And he says, the U.S. expansion followed in the footsteps of indigenous expansion. So in other words, there's already innovation. There's already, movement. It's not static. It's not as if, there had not been development. In his book, he gives a whole example of how within the valley near Clear Lake, some of the paths there have already, had an ancient history. And all of these other sites as well, which I know some of you are familiar with these precious sites. All of these have their own histories and their own ways of being sacred and telling the story of the importance to the people and their relationships to the land. So how does ecology shape California Native American experiences? This is a question that I ask my students, and so my students and I, as I mentioned before, we're in the traditional Winton homeland. So this is the place where I take them. We're on a campus, and we're 15 minutes away from the Cache Creek Nature Preserve, where we have the native tending garden that Pam Gonzalez and Diana Mendrades tend to, and they're the stewards of this place. And so it's in this place where my students learn about the importance of acorn tradition, and they actually, in one case, they helped actually create an acorn granary. This is Diana, who's also known as Tuli Woman. She's Maidu, and so in a whole days, my students learned about acorn, the acorn granary, lining it with the different plants and why the lining should happen. They also learn about the plants, the native plants in the English, Latin, and Wintu names and their multiple uses, and how these plants are important to the land. And many times my students who have, been born and raised there will all of a sudden say like, wow, that's a plant that I've always noticed, but I never knew its name. I never knew its history. And so all of a sudden they start connecting to the ecology, and whether native or non-native, they start feeling a little bit more of social responsibility for, how the plants are being treated in our region. This is one of the structures in the Cache Creek Nature Preserve where some of the lessons take place. They also learn about how the structure resembles in some ways a roundhouse, and they also learn about how there's contested conversations about that, and why not, to have a structure like that. And so it gives them a way to also start to understand intergroup relationships and the different viewpoints from different generations of Native community members. In this place, we just hosted the Native Youth Foodway Summit, which was actually a collaboration with the Intertribal Agricultural Council, and so we were really, really honored to be able to host California, Nevada, and Hawaiian Native youth learning about their foodways and protecting their seeds. Diana also just right after that was willing to serve as our keynote speaker for our Seeds and Culture conference. And so one of the lessons that she has shared with my students and community members is just breaking all these assumptions, the myths about acorns and how, and she says, they say that all we had was acorns, but that's not true. We had an abundance of foodways, and she'll go into all the details of what the ecology entails. And in some ways, Professor Kat Anderson also articulates some of these ideas about the Native American knowledge, traditional knowledge, and the management of the California natural resources. So there's a lot to say about this, by the way, and she talks a lot about the burning method and tending to the California region through the burning method. So another important question that I share with my students is, what are some of the California Native American historical experiences. So first, ground them in the ecology, and then give them the dose of history, right? Because we're all miseducated. Native and non-native people have been miseducated about California history. And so these are some of the major topics that we talk about, or eras that we talk about, the pre-contact, the Spanish, Mexican, and also European American contact, and the different treaties that were negotiated but were never ratified in the early years. You know, I have a couple more slides about that. So these are all the topics. And then in terms of these whole ideas of the nations, or the nation shifting and changing. And so we do spend quite some time talking about these unratified treaties, because this is kind of like a hidden secret. A lot of people don't know about all the different treaties that were negotiated between 1851 and 52, and how these were 18 treaties. That's a lot of treaties, and they were hidden from the public until 1905. And these are actually some of the documents that Professor Beth Rose Middleton at UC Davis Native Studies, who's doing some research around this, all the documents that she has found around them. So her and I actually collaborate, because she teaches basically sister Native Studies courses, so we share a lot of the information and sort of looking at what some of these like early ideas of the proposed reservations were, and then some of the glimpse at the different maps of the unratified treaty lands. And there's a lot too that happens post-treaty. The removal of native communities in the California region, the conditional settlements, establishment of reservations, and then the different policies that were intended to address the homelessness of California Indians in theory, but not necessarily in practice. And we could see this actually when we look at the California tribal lands map, that those, treaties aren't necessarily put into practice. These are some of the texts that my students also get a chance to take a look at, that have to do with describing the California Indian slavery and hunting, and the different early policies involved in that sustained a genocide in California. Sometimes my students are really surprised, because when they think about genocide, they think of another country or just somewhere else, except for, here in this homeland. So I do ask them, did you know that did you know genocide can take multiple forms? We get to look at the UN definition of genocide, and they actually get to analyze how these forms of genocide were sustained, not through attitudes, but through policies that then sustain attitudes and violent practices. So they get to look at the different forms of domination and also resistance that takes place. And so some of them ask, like, wasn't it just the disease? Kind of like what the Sac State professor said, right, like 2 years ago. They'll say, some will argue that wasn't it just genocide that decreased the California Native population. It wasn't the disease, but it was more deliberate practices and denials of care and removal that constituted the forms of genocide, and taking into account that legal safeguards or reparations were never actually made, even after policies of domination and violence took place. So we look at the different kinds of implications for California Native communities based on the history. And we also take a look at why did the U.S. or how did the U.S. law enable genocide of Native Americans? And first of all, we deconstruct the doctrine of discovery, and then also we look at the fact that, again, as I mentioned earlier, citizenship isn't granted to Native Americans until 1924, and what that means is the denial of the American justice system and not being able to raise any complaints or concerns. And so the state of California, as other states in the U.S., had allowed funding for militias. So one of the things that, try to look at, wait, let me go back. Doctrine of discovery, right? Okay, so now, all right, so now that's supposed to make more sense. Doctrine of discovery, what do you mean discovery, right? So they get to demystify a little bit more of what this means, this notion of discovery, who's discovering and how, and actually getting into this doctrine of discovery is for them a way of demystifying early history. Many of them didn't know that in 1493 this policy had been created in Europe, and mostly it was created to reduce the conflict between Europeans, but there's major implications for Native peoples, indigenous peoples today because of this doctrine of discovery. And we also get to learn that in 2002 to the present, there are actually members, Christian and non-Christian, people in different churches that are calling for denouncing or urging various governments around the world to reconsider dismantling the doctrine of discovery because it's still in effect. And then that mission lesson, right? You all know about the mission lesson, right? You did it with the sugar and all that stuff. So they get a chance to reevaluate the whole history of the mission, and they also get to look at some of the contemporary ways that Native and non-Native people have questioned the recent canonization of Sierra, and they get to also see some of the contradictions that took place even within this time period where you have members of Native communities that recognize the oppression that was linked to the mission system and how it served ultimately as a way of creating a political economy. But even while this canonization is taking place, you have leaders who do say, I'm going to discredit the misconceptions that many have, that California Indians are extinct, and to show that we are here thriving and strong. And this is one of the leaders in the Ohlone community, and so there's a lot of controversy around this because even though he opposed the canonization, he also agreed to be part of the ceremony, and so he was in a very difficult situation and decided to read the first scripture reading in his language, the Shawnee language, and there's a lot of, like I said, just controversy and conversations and contested debates about that position. So American Indians, Native people, California Native peoples are still here. So what are some of the California Native American experiences today? The experiences have to do with being involved in language revitalization, and I think that Carlos is going to speak to some of these. Also being involved in restoring native foodways, protecting seeds and the plants and the ways of sharing food, and then also the sacred sites, raising awareness and protection of sacred sites. Karina Gould and Janella LaRose have been really involved in the Bay Area around this, and then also Chief Kayleen Sisk as well. And there's been also ways that California Indians have been involved in addressing intergenerational trauma and healing. I think we just mentioned Carlos. Mike Duncan is one of the persons who's been involved, and being involved in bringing some of the ancestral items back home with NAPRA and some of the different policies that have made it possible to bring back. Is that right? Yeah, so NAPRA is the policy indicating that institutions, museums, or other cultural institutions that have native artifacts need to turn in a list of those artifacts, especially if they have federal funding, and then if there's native groups that have that can prove, and it is a very, very bureaucratic process to be able to prove that those are your ancestors' belongings and be able to basically regain some of the belongings. There's also California Native Indians and non-natives involved in raising awareness about misrepresentation. Everything from like demystifying Miss Pocahontas. So Dr. Reed at Sac State, that's been one of her major projects. And then also, if you could see in the very corner, all Indians do not live in teepees, right? Especially not in the California region, right? So that's been like one of the major ones. And then the mascot too, education around the mascot. And the Wintu Nation has actually supported the making of the commercial. The commercial around the mascot, and I think it was 2 or 3 years ago during the football game it came out. And so people were able to question that. Raising awareness around climate change, environmental conditions, maintaining presence at the Native Day at the state capitol. Being also involved, those who are federally recognized and those that are associated to casinos. You have some that are trying to do their best to remake what governance means, and then also addressing some of the myths and realities around casinos and gaming, and just demystifying the whole idea that Stephanie isn't getting thousands of dollars every month or something, right? If you are part of a group that's federally recognized or associated with a casino. This one here, being involved in remaking the California Indian curriculum is one that is definitely in effect right now. Just last month, there was a meeting of teachers, native and non-native teachers, K-12, that got together to relook at specifically that whole lesson around the missions. And so I'm really proud of the work that Dr. Rose Borunda and others are doing around the mission curriculum. And then sustaining the Native scholars, especially at UC Davis in Native Studies. And last year I was able to actually be a visiting scholar with them, and so I really appreciate the work that they're doing there. There's different kinds of collaborations that have taken place and continue to take place between California Indians and non-California Indians in urban and rural areas. And so that's important to recognize too. And there's also a certain degree of collaboration with Mexican indigenous migrants, and this is more in the Los Angeles area, where you have California natives, non-California natives, and then you have various Mexican indigenous migrants trying to negotiate spaces, either ceremonial or cultural spaces, and sustain. Okay, my time's up. Okay, Carlos, you're almost ready, right? Okay. So I'll be 1, maybe 2 minutes. So sustaining Native ceremonies in communities, including in prisons as well. And sustaining Native and non-Native ceremonies like the sunrise ceremony at Alcatraz, and then also being involved in national and international movements that have to do with climate or indigenous rights or environmental contamination. And my favorite too, being involved with supporting some of the young adults that are involved in creating the music, and it's mixed traditional and non-traditional musics together, so it's a fusion, and these are mostly Northern California, California Indian young adults involved. And then this is my last point here. Jackie Nunez, who I was able to meet last year, I learned how she is doing her best to sustain ancient music and the traditional stories of her culture and tradition, Chumash, and so there's different ways that, again, California Indians are involved today in trying to respond to some of those implications of that history that I described earlier. And I have so much to learn, and I feel like so many have so much to learn that I hope that there's more awareness about Native and non-Native miseducation. Everybody needs to have access to Native American studies. And you know, I believe that I really would like everybody to become lifelong learners of this Native American experiences. May there be a creation or continue to be a creation of spaces here at this college and in the larger community and state for teaching and learning Native American studies for students and community. I'm very hopeful, as the ethnic studies resolution has been passed in some of the high schools in California, that these are some of the classes that we're going to be also developing at the high school level. So may this college and community continue to be in collaboration with each other. All right, so after my boring professor voice, Carlos, we're really counting on you.
Okay. No, Carlos is my cousin. No. He isn't.
Well, how are you doing this evening? Good. All right. Yeah, we'll probably need that in a little bit. Just came from Yosemite area. Had a cultural exchange with some people throughout the United States. Many different people, and so raced back here from Rush Creek. They got that resort up there, pretty nice. But it's cool to experience many different things. You know, as a young man, I'm 42, going on 18. I'll try not to be too loud, but I usually get kind of loud and get excited, and a lot of times the elders say, speak slower, and I said, well, I can't, because I have a lot in me that I want to share with people, and I'm afraid that if I don't show it with you, then I'll forget, for one. Yeah, oh, that's fine. Yeah, it's just left or right, huh? All right, so first of all, I got to start with the song, because the song makes me feel better, allows me to get comfortable. You probably won't see me sit down, because I might fall asleep listening to myself sometimes, but you know what? I hope to give you guys some insight into who I am as a Native person, but at the same time, share some things with you, maybe some questions you might have had, maybe I could answer some of them things, but I don't know everything because, you know, I'm in training, if you will. I'm a young man, still growing, still have a long ways to go. You know, my Uncle Marvin, which is my uncle-in-law, told me that, you know, his brother said, if you don't speak your mind and tell what you got to say, then you might forget. That's Uncle Joe. Then Uncle Marvin said, well, if you don't, you know, stay humble, and, you know, when you're 80 years old and still be humble, then, you know, you're not really doing the things you're supposed to be doing. So at the same time, I know that I got a long ways to go, and that, you know, as I get to be an elder, which is the ultimate goal, because there's a lot of teachings and a lot of things that I still need to discover in my young life, that then I'll be able to share with the young people, just like they shared with me. So if I start rambling on and start going on, it's because everything in relation to is connected to a story. And that story is brought to me and shared with me by my elders. The elders are very important. They play a very important role because through them, I'm allowed to go up here and speak. Through them, they have paved the way and went through a lot of trials and tribulations and things that affected them in many different ways. You know, spiritually, mentally, physically. Things that hindered them from doing what they wanted to do in their life. But at the same time, as a Me-Wuk people, as a person, as an individual from this land, the ancestral land that you see here, it's very important that we educate each other and we work with each other, because, you know, at Mother Earth, they call it Wale. Wale told the Earth's place. And we all have to live here. We all have to be a part of what's happening here. And so if we don't know how to take care of the land and preserve the land like the indigenous people from this land have done for thousands of years, of course, the land that we've occupied this land for about 8,000 to 9,000 plus years, and I know it even goes further back, but we have to do that together. We just can't do it just an individual. You know, I don't work as just one person. I work with the whole tribe of people, a lot of indigenous people throughout the states, the United States, throughout the world, and we all have one goal, and that's just to take care of Mother Earth. And so that's what I speak to you right now. So before I get started, I like to share the song with you, because that allows me to relax and feel good, and hopefully it relaxes you at the same time, and you don't get too relaxed, because I do get louder, and I do start talking a lot faster. And so just bear with me a minute, okay? All right. Musical instrument. Of course, the drum has been adopted in the state of California. But where we come from, we have a foot drum. And a foot drum is inside of our ceremonial roundhouse. They call it a hongi. And the drum itself, they call it tumamu. And it's the sound that the drum makes, tumamu. And so another instrument that we have is they call it takata. Takata is the instrument that we use. It's our instrument of choice. I call that the heartbeat of America, if you will. Some might say that people were here for America was, but you know what, I'm not going to argue with anybody or debate with anybody. I just want to come in a humble way, respectful way, and share the knowledge that I have of self, so I can maybe give you that insight or share some things with you. Is that all right with you?
Yes.
All righty. So through that way and through protocol, you know, asking the grandfathers and grandmothers that, you know, allowed me to be here today, share this song, and at the same time, if it's meant to be, it'll come out the way it's supposed to. But it's not meant to be, then it won't come out the way it's supposed to. And so we got to make sure we do take all measures and all precautions from when we're dealing with anything that we come across, because that's the Indian way, that's the Me-Wuk way, the Me-Wuk way. So meaning you, Me-Wuk, Indian person, Me-Wuk people, Me-Wuk all the people, and that's who we are. Hey, hey, wale, le, wale, le, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, le, wale, le, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, le, wale, le, wale, yo. Luti, luti, kanu, so tema, wale, le, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, le, wale, le, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, wale, yo. Luti, luti, kanu, so tema, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, yo. Luti, luti, kanu, so tema, wale, yo. Hey, hey, wale, walele, waleyo, luti, kano, chotema, walele, waleyo, heyo, hey, ha. Oh. These things that happen overnight. There's a lot of things that happen. As I started walking, and I'll try to give you a little about myself, because how I got to this place and how I'm able to share with you. But at the same time, of course, I go to the elders and I go to the tribe, and they say, hey, it's all right, you do what you do because you have that gift and church. And I said, well, I'm nobody special, but you know what? This is a way of life, and it's a way of life that we plan on sharing with each and every one of you. So I am a language teacher. I teach language. The language that we speak is Mi-Wuk, our language. And so I share it with everyone. At one time, the elders said, well, are we going to share this language with everyone? Natives and non-natives? Well, you know what? I truly believe that we all come from somewhere. No matter what ethnicity we are, we all come from a homeland of somewhere. And that we all have different stories that we're going to tell. But at the same time, this is a story that I'm sharing with you. So, you know, in relation to, it's a respect thing, you know. I'm sure you'll share a story with me later on, or a song that you might have. I've had a guy sing an Irish song to me before. I've had another guy sing a different song to me before. In Spanish, I've had people from different tribes sing songs to me. That's that cultural exchange. And it's a respect thing, you know. You're honoring the other person. I'm honoring you. And you're honoring me in a sense, allowing me to be up here to speak to you. So I'm not trying to be on a pedestal or just, you know, stand up on the stage and, you know, be that guy. My teacher used to call it hot dog, and I'm like, hot dog? Why am I a hot dog? And he, Brown Tad, he's passed on since then. He used to do a lot of things. He taught me many things, and so now I've took it over the spot up for the Pinecrest Lake. They got a place up there called the Shadow of the Mi-Wuk Trail. And it's the Shadow of the Mi-Wuk Trail. And so I'm able to share some things up there, but I better get to this PowerPoint here. And so, as I started walking home one day, and I was humming this song, and it was a song like, okay, wow, that song so much like a village in Sonora area. They call it Pepelena. I'm like, oh, wow, there's a connection there, you know. I started thinking, wow, I just had like a, I don't know what you call it, epiphany or something cool like that. I'm like, I don't even know how to spell that word, but it sounded good though. So in the language, I think a lot of things we kind of adapt, but there's some Spanish and things that we've adopted into our language, and there's some things that we don't have, you know. A lot of people kind of share the word kawaii, kawaii, you know, for horse and things like that. I don't tell too many horse stories that we did eat horse at one time to survive, you know, so we won't talk about that too much. But we're still here. Machuxis is a formal greeting. Machuxis!
Machuxis!
There you go, I like that. That's good to hear all the time. No matter where you come from, it's good to hear that somebody acknowledges you and you acknowledge them at the same time. Machuxis. So I come from the Tuolumne Band of Me-Wuk Indians located in Tuolumne. Tuolumne Rancheria, of course, in 1910 it was established, and homeless Indians moved to that area. And of course there's villages all over this county. A lot of village sites over there. Villages all the way up the hill, Kawanucha houses in the middle. And the tribe actually did a lot of things to preservation of the land and took care of it. A lot of cow herders brought some cows in there and stomped through all the medicinal areas and all the food areas. But like I said, I keep hitting and missing on these things, and everything's connected in one way or another. So I'm sorry if you got me going back and forth, but that's what I do. Vision statement. I just put that up there just to give a little insight of what we're trying to do as a tribe. Like I said, we've been around for a minute, and we've kind of learned how to write and read and do all kinds of cool stuff, so it's a good thing. So, tribal vision statement. Tuolumne Band of Me-Wuk Indians is a sovereign nation that is dedicated to uphold the social, economic stability throughout self-reliance, to promote the health, safety, and welfare of our Indian people. You guys got that down? That's pretty cool, not too bad, huh? All right. Before contact, I got miscellaneous things up there. Different tribes of Mi-Wuk people. Of course, we're here. We're recognized as a Central Sierra Mi-Wuk people. Some people ask, why is it spelled M-E-W-U-K, M-I-W-K, M-I-W-O-K? Well, centrally recognized, the Tuolumne Band decided her business status and centrally recognized, we'd spell it M-E-W-K. And then that gets into the language and linguistics, and all these things start happening. And then M-I is singular and M-E is plural. And they started adding different suffixes and things on it. And it starts changing the word, and you're like, okay, I got it. That's why you guys have M-E-W-K. All right, so there we got that. Anyhow, so you have, as far as the coastal area by Petaluma and Roner Park, you got the Tuolumne Band language speakers, which are the coastal Me-Wuk people. I know a lot of people that speak over there. One of my brothers, Joseph Byron, speaks like 5 different languages, and one of them is Tuolumne Band. He understands Bodega Bay Me-Wuk. You also have Lake Me-Wuk. And then you come further this way, you start getting into Plains Me-Wuk, and then you start coming a little bit further, and of course we get into towns, Lockford, you know, we could get into the different little reservoirs that are down there, and the different places that are dammed up, and village sites. You get over to Buena Vista and Ione, then you start coming over to San Andreas, Jackson, English Camp, and further down. So that's on the northern side. They call it Tomleco, which is the northern area. And then you get over here to Central, then you get over to the Tumito side, which is the southern people. So I myself and my family come from Casoy Monono and Molpiso, which is Murfreesboro, Vallecito area. And of course we were pushed out of that area because of a lot of different things, you know, mining and different things happen like that. But at one time we had a last name of Casus, but I think it was too close to being like in missionization. They had made us change it because it was too much like Jesus. Yeah. So I know a lot of Indian people have stuff like that. My Wyandotte lady better wake up over there.
She's awake.
All right, there we go. I just messing with you.
She's awake.
I know that lady. I think that's busy. She tells good stories too. Okay, so, and then on my grandmother's side, Pulakuya, nose stick ornament through her nose, Sophia Thompson, or Sophia Thompson, who come from Piglicue, Roland area, Pied Mountain Lake area, and there's a lot of places around here. Our family goes all the way up into Greenlee, Red Cloud area, all the way up to Yosemite area, and so, yeah, there we are. We weren't nomadic. A lot of people think, oh, you traveled with the buffalo. I said, no, we didn't. We stayed close to home. You know, our Indian people stayed near the waterways. Of course, if you didn't have water, and the resources that you needed were by the water, of course, the different materials for the baskets and all the materials. So if you didn't have water, of course, how'd they get their water? Anybody? Anyone? You could interact, I don't mind.
No. Snow.
Their baskets, their snow, or their water basket, they call it hulaka, or they got the cooking basket called holacha, and then they got different sinking baskets, they call it hekalu, and then you got natural springs that were all over the place. So that's a little something. The kids are always wondering, a bottle of water? No, we're not yet. So our people were hunters and gatherers. The men would hunt. Of course, we have a lot of words that we never even had before. Like, we have a word for elephant, we have a word for alligator, and I'm like, wait, that people weren't from here. So I think in our travels, we kind of adopted these things, and, you know, people had brought it through, or I don't know if some Australians visited at one time, or the African people had came through and, you know, was sharing some, you know, something with us. But, you know, we've got a lot of good language out there, and it's for the people that I share this. So, of course, you know, the salmon are coming up right now. I'm sorry, salmon. Yeah, you start speaking this different language, and then the words start acting different, and people are looking at you like, what's wrong with you? I said, I don't know, I'm just being me. You know? So I like to laugh, and I like to make sure that people don't get bored. But at the same time, this is who I am, and I won't change. Because I work with kids mainly, work with high school kids and some college kids. Went down to Stanford, spoke to the linguistics group. And I had them going too. It was hot as heck in that room, but you know what? You do what you got, it doesn't matter. Because you know what? My elders sacrificed a lot more than me standing up in a hot room in front of a lot of people I don't know. So you know what? You got to put your best foot forward sometimes. So, yeah, the salmon are coming up there. I think they only come up as far as Goodwin Canyon. Anybody know further than that? They're down at Chocachino, which is Lover's Leap area. You guys know Chocachino, right? Knight's Ferry? Yeah. A lot of stories about that place. My grandma Ethel Geisdorff, she passed on since then. Her dad was a Hupa. We didn't have chiefs, we had captains. And of course, when Spanish came through, they called it El Capitan. And so in relation to respects to the Spanish speakers, you know, I know a lot of good cuss words. Just kidding, I don't. I'm just messing with you. So, no, respect. So, like I was trying to get at is, you know, them salmon are coming up right now, you know, getting ready to spawn and do their thing. And I know a lot of people up at Kuduk, Hupa, Yurok, you know, they get that salmon up there and they have the rights, they're fishing up there, and they get that eel. You know, they just mentioned Vincent Medina from Chochinyo Aloni. Actually, Vincent Medina from Chochinyo Aloni, he was up here for my Me-Wuk Language Symposium, our 4th annual. And he comes up here and he talks about all the native foods that are out there. And there's a lot of foods out there. I know that I had to make sure I talked on something because I was in Mr. Sut's class and he goes, don't pick any mushroom. And I said, I remember that. Thank you for clarifying that. We don't want to just pick any mushroom. So, but we do pick the ones that are edible, of course. So, anyhow, as the deer came through, you know, they hunted. They got that deer, but they used all the resources that were a part of that deer, you know. But at the same time, from a spiritual aspect, they didn't just go hunt them. They had to pray on it. You know, they had to take care of all their weaponry that they used to go get that. They didn't have a gun or a rifle to go shoot. You know, they had bow and arrows, but not like on TV and the stereotypes. Oh yeah, bow and arrows. You know, me hunt, you shoot kind of guy. You know, no way. They had language, and it was amazing, and it's still amazing to this day, and it's still happening. So, live by the waterways and there's springs. Oh, there's the answer right there. We won't get too much of that. Got a picture of my sister. She's like 25 years old now. She's pretty good at what she does, and she was helping cook an acorn right there. Of course, we use the talele, which is the black acorn. The acorn is called watuka, and then the meal that comes from it, the acorn soup, they call it nupa. Got an elder right there sitting on top of a chase, and she's grinding them. The more rocks that you have, the more, they call them pata, the more holes that you have, of course, the more Indian people that lived in that area. So you'll see I know a lot of ranches around this place. Why, I found something, or there might be some duff and some pine needles covering over it, but still it's remaining, it's being protected, and so that's good at the same time. We have a lady up there, Reba Fuller, that works for us up there at the tribe, and she's really good at documenting these ancestral territories and the lands and everything on the landscape, and so we're very grateful for what she does, because a lot of people will just go out there and look around. But you know what, you know, she mentioned NAGPRA. NAGPRA is very important for the Indian people. Native American Graves Repatriation Protection Act allows you to get your old timers back, the old ones back, and get them back to where they belong, and not, you know, the most likely descendant. The MLD is the person that allows them to, you know, do that monitoring and surveying and see what's out there. And we don't just go do it on purpose. We do it because there's some sort of construction going on, or there's something going on that's kind of halter some sort of business, or somebody from digging up some ancestral lands. So it's a good thing that they have that NAGPRA there for that case. You got a picture of the talele, you got a picture of the chase. Different spellings, of course, our orthography that we created in Tuolumne. They started about 8 years ago. Sunday Hendrik Sue, he's passed on since then, well-known person that just was motivated to helping the Indian people in general. And so he's done a lot for our community and a lot for the county in many ways to just give insight and just teach the people about the people, you know. So, acorn granaries, they make acorn granaries down at the Putwin area. I know Leland Kinter and all them, they have a great living language circle down there, great language preservation revitalization system that's going on down there. Leland Kinter is a fluent speaker, and they're very blessed to have a fluent speaker like Bertha Mitchell down there that's been able to work with them. And so I've got some great information from them. It's allowed me to do things that I normally couldn't do, but you know, we all kind of scratch each other's back, so it's pretty cool. So you got the chukka right there, and of course you got the different resources that we leave and we use and talk about taking care of Mother Earth and the land and our surroundings and our whole livelihood, you know. And preservation is the key, because you know, you need to take care of it so, you know, future generations will be allowed to, you know, enjoy that too at the same time. A lot of times people go, why, we're walking up at Table Mountain, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you got a story about Yayali? You guys heard the story about Yayali? Yeah. No. Yayali, the man-eating giant that used to, and there's a story, I can't even tell you the story, it's too crazy. He had this chicken-lay basket, and he would entice pregnant women, and he would get them, but the way he would entice pregnant women, he'd stir them up in a pot. very mystical, magical, spiritual story. And I said, well, you know what, we could break that down in our language documentation and break it down and put it in our orthography or our new writing system and the basic AEIUs of Me-Wuk, and we could share it with the kids. But then when I started to break it down, I'm like, yeah, that's going to be scary for the kids. We can't do that. So, yeah, we didn't do that one. But the grown-ups were like, oh, yeah, put that one away. I said, yeah, good idea. You know, in the Yosemite area, they got the Woodland, the eater of the northern people, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you guys can keep that one over there, too. So things changed. You know, they get into the homily, the ceremonial roundhouse, and they tell stories, and they share so many different things with each other. But that was a way of life. You didn't have to get at the 8 to 5. You lived, you went hunting, you gathered, you sang songs, you sang work songs. You know, we were a peace tribe. We didn't have to fight for anything, you know, back in the day. But now, you know, there's different ways of fighting. But you know what? Oral tradition is the best way to, you know, just really just build yourself up and to carry on that traditions. There's some more. 2 more minutes. All right, 2 more minutes. I got 37 more slides. Here we go. Anyhow, you're going to see me around the way. I'm all over the place. There's many different things, many different arenas that I speak in. There's so much to share with you guys, and not enough time. And more continuing on in this, you know, survival of in the days that we live in today. And you know, thank goodness there's no carpool lanes, so we're all right. So having our kids bringing the language back is very strong. You know, you speak about the umacha and the houses that we live in today. We're very blessed and gifted in many ways. Of course, the cedar tree, they call it chapaha, and the semila, which is the cedar bark. You know, a lot of people don't realize that once that water hits it, you know, in the summer times it keeps it nice and cool, but in the winter times when the snow and the water hits it, it expands the bark. You know, so there's a lot of tricks of trade and that the Indian people have been doing for thousands of years, and so we won't get missions. She talked about missions. We've been affected in many different ways, you know, and one of my great grandfathers was he actually went into one of the missions over at Vallecito area, and he was blinded by a booby trap of trying to steal gold from the missions, which I don't know if he was claiming what was rightfully his, or he just got lucky that they dug the hole in the mountain before he did. I don't know. So anyhow, you know, the devastation that the mining did to the landscape and all that that power of them hoses pumping into Mother Earth and just tearing up the erosion and everything, you know. So there's a lot to it that I have to share with you. You know, that's my grandmother Pilikuye, and where we come from, and then her son up there, Anuoye. So Jack Billy Sue, he's a Hayapo from our area. Sam Persus Domingo Sue, that my grandfather. I don't look like him, do I? Thank goodness. Oh my goodness. Anyhow, like I said, I like to make people laugh, and you know, a lot of times that you speak on some of these things, it's hard to talk about. But at the same time, you know, eventually we'll get to it, and everybody will be educated in all of our lifestyles and our histories, and we'll have a better understanding of how to live, and you know, just be grateful for what we have. And you know, there's a lot of things. You know, you got Robert Koch, who's still around, standing right there. You know, next to Vala Wesso. So she's got a lot of documentation and language. The burning of the Digger Indian that one time, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. The burning of the Digger Indian, 1924, Jack Billy stood up there and they said, we'll no longer be called the Digger Indians, we'll be called the Me-Wuk. And therefore we became the Me-Wuk, which is the people. There we go. Different, like she mentioned, treaties. There were, you know, not taken care of. Black Oak Casino is just something that's allowed us to be on a different level. You know, I'm not condoning gaming. I'm not saying it's not good, but you know what? At the same time, it's got a lot of our people off a lot of different things, and it's gave 1,000 people plus, you know, employment. You know, I know that Chicken Ranch does a great deal of things too with what they're doing down there, you know. So it brings the people up and it helps the communities out. And you know, I'm not here to say go there and be there to either or of them. I'm just letting you know that with the money we plan on doing a lot of things. We see more than 13,000 plus patients at our clinic. And you know what? I know there's a clinic down in Chicken Ranch and they do what they need to do too. And that's just bringing wellness and health to the people. And that's what it's all about. Putting that money where it needs to be, and it's a positive thing, you know. So there we go. Elders in the past on is still around. There you go, right there. That speaks a lot right there. We're roundhouse people, and a lot of the teachings and things that I've learned in my life, and you know, that's the Mother Earth. That's the mother's womb right there. That's the belly that we all come out of in a way of speaking that you know, we relate to the teachings that have been shared with us for thousands of years. And so anyways, I'm going to let that go right there. I thank you for allowing me to share some things with you. Indian money, any old school, can you take that to the kids? You don't get one, no, you can't. They call it pilata. So anyhow, our language, we have different languages. So I'm just going to scroll through, you know, tribal governments, and well, there it is right there, and all the different identities that we have. And it's for the people that we do what we do, you know, preservation of the land, education, extending a helping hand, and culture related, where people just like each and every one of us in this room, and respects to all of you that came this evening, and thank you for allowing me to share just a little bit. And if you see me around the way, stop and talk with me. Come see me at the Chewewe Coach at the Blue House Education Center, and I'll talk your head off. Hey.
I don't know about you, but I feel like we just got started. Yeah. At the beginning, we had said, I had shared briefly about my experience. Just one small California experience. California native, Hupa, Yurok, Irish. Carlos had shared his perspective as a Tuolumne Band of Me-Wuk man. Melissa has shared her perspective and knowledge as a Native American Studies and Ethnic Studies professor. I had shared that there were so many experiences. And can you see, we rushed through so many different concepts, and it was like we just got exposed to just a little bit, a little taste. Raise your hand if you would like to learn more about anything. Raise your hand if you saw 2 things or more that you'd like to learn about. It's very significant, okay? Were any of your assumptions or perceptions challenged? Something that you had held before and in this space, did you learn something new? Yeah. I want to thank all of you for your engagement and your attention. Even though there's a lot of bright lights and I can't see everyone, I have really bad eyesight anyway, I didn't see anyone's phone out.
Working on my tan, it's all right.
Your focus and your respect, it honors all of us, and I'm so appreciative for everyone who's made the effort to be here. Melissa drove all the way from Yolo County with her family, 2.5-hour drive through the rain to come. And Carlos was up in Yosemite as he shared, and he still made it with his family. We have people who've come near and far just to be here and try to get a little bit of knowledge. And as you can tell, there are so many things, topics and concepts. In the program, you'll note that there are some, stereotypical topics that you might want to consider checking out. But we have things covered like tribal identity. What does it mean to actually have a policy in place so that you can actually try to have, ancestors and artifacts that belong to your tribe to be able to be returned? And yet it's so difficult. How can you have 81 tribes petitioning in the state of California for tribal recognition, waiting for the federal government just to recognize their status? Up in Yosemite, that's still happening. They are not recognized by the federal government as truly Native people. Imagine that if someone said, I don't recognize that you exist. How would that make you feel? So having these perspectives, this voice that I had mentioned at the beginning, if I'm in a conference and no one brings up Native people, even in all of the other ethnic groups are identified, It's not just me getting, excuse my language, pissed off, but it is a violent physical reaction that I feel in every fiber of myself. My blood does not just boil, but it's ancestors who are not being acknowledged. There are current issues that are still happening. There's so many pieces of our experiences that go ignored, unquestioned. And so for all of you being here, it's taking at least one step to try to understand and appreciate and even listen to those voices. And again, just a little snippet. We've been here for a little over an hour, and so many subconcepts, questions, topics. So if you're Native or non-Native, we are all community. Just like we're sharing this room right now, we share this space, this land, this area. We are connected despite traumas of the past and any continued issues of today. I invite you to consider, how can we strengthen the bonds as members of this same community? How can you help educate others, help challenge others' misperceptions? The perpetuated acts and ideas that are laced with colonization, oppression, and those continued misunderstandings at all levels. I learned something recently, a word called praxis, where you don't just learn for learning's sake, like collecting a bunch of, fun little shells and learning the name of them. But it's learning that demands action, where you can't just sit and know this. You learn just a brief little piece about the formal academic system and how we, try to understand the Native experience through Native American studies, tribal identity, tribal governance, mental health, the issues that affect Native people today on reservations and in urban areas, land disputes, preserving Mother Earth for not just now, but for the future, our young people, honoring the ancestors, all of these topics. What can you do personally, whether it's strengthening the connection that you have with Native people in the room or other tribes if you're Native? Non-Natives and Natives need to work together, regardless of tribal status, regardless of policies. So I just invite you to please consider what you could personally do. The Dalai Lama said, "It is not enough to be compassionate, you must act." Okay, so we actually have about a few minutes left to open the floor for any questions. So it's kind of if I go like this, I can see someone in the back right here.
So I want to thank Stephanie and Dr. Moreno and Carlos for being here. It was really awesome. And I have a question for Carlos about Colombia right here. I feel deeply torn about the land and how it was washed away during placer mining. And I wonder if in the Me-Wuk oral tradition, are there stories about what was the cultural land here?
There's a lot of information and stories told by elders about this area right here. There was a young lady that worked with us, and she was telling me stories about Mrs. Plummer. And she's actually in our National Archives from early 1920s or so, where she was a homeless Indian at one time, and she came to Tuolumne for rations, and it was documented in the agent's notes. Sent to Sacramento, send us some rations. There's a young lady named Mrs. Plummer here. And so there's a lot of, I hear about different ranches and places here where there are, what's that indentation up here? So there's a lot of stories between people, and there's a lot of documentation about the village sites here, and of course all the Native people that ran along the water line over here. And when they talked about most likely descendant, who's the most likely descendant of person, or if they ever found remains or anything, it was up for grabs because a lot of people traveled that waterway, going upstream or downstream. So, yeah, there's some stories and documentation, and I think I have quite a bit of stuff at the office, and to have that come out and share with the people would be pretty cool one day,
Yeah. Thank you.
Over here.
I'll stand so I can be heard. I'm fascinated about the traditions in the American culture, Native American culture of the medicine man. Is that a tradition that is being carried on, and how would a young person be brought in by the tribe to apprentice or learn the role of being the medicine man?
You're talking to me? Her? Okay. Well, I've spoke to the masters gardeners before in this area. I know. Here goes the microphone again. Told you, get you in trouble. So I've spoke to master gardeners in this area about some of the plants, and there's some things, and then there's some documentation and audio recordings that state that a long time ago, you knew who the people carried that medicine, you know, not so much in the shaman way, but they just carried that medicine, and we call that wona. And the ones that spoke about it were really not the ones that carried it, but the ones that carried it were the ones that showed it. And so there's some elders that documented some things, and it just so happens that one of my teacher, Brown Tad Sid, that passed on since then, he had a lot of great information about medicinal plants and things like that. And there's still some people that still have some teachings. How extensive, I don't know. But will they ever share with you? If you become their friend, maybe. You know, yeah, but it could be, you know, with today's, I don't know what you call it, pharmacy, I don't know, whatever codes they got today, it's got to go through and has to have the certain print on it, you know, that say it's illegal and it's not, you know, I don't know. Anyhow, but if you don't do the right thing, you know, it can turn into a hallucinogen. You know, there's a lot of things, and I don't want people to go out there and try it, but speak to somebody that might know of some of the medicinal plants, and, you know, knowing about the willow and how the elder used to chew on it, you know, chew on it for toothaches, you know, stuff like that, because it does carry, what's that word? You guys all know it. That has it. There you go. I know she said it. So, what did you say?
Asphalt.
Yeah, there you go. So all that, the big words, you know, so I don't know the big words yet, but I know of a lot of plants and a lot of medicinals, a lot of edibles and a lot of teas like that. But, you know, like I said, I'm still in training, and it'll be, you know, a while till I'm able to, you know, be that someone to relate to. But I share a little bit with, if I can, you know. But there's other people out there that are really knowledgeable.
Thank you.
Are there any local businesses that particularly support, you know, our native community here? You know, where you sell you know, those mushrooms you gather, or you know, fish.
I don't believe so. We have some elders that take the kids out and they go get some of the morels and they go out there, out to the river. It's all about, you know, there's that story that they had, and one of the elders had told that story how they used to jump out and they'd play sick so they could get the medicines, because, you know, people were, you know, I like that story, that's a good one. But at the same time, the elders are teaching the people closest to them, because I truly believe that they don't want people to misuse it. You know, and some of the speakings and some of the people that I've talked to, you know, the young lady spoke of the elder told her just to get what you needed it, but he put it in a way to where she understood that, like, and she understood that don't take more than you need, you know, just what you need, you know, so. But as for herbalists and things like that, there's always people looking for information on that stuff.
There was a question over here.
How much, has there been much preservation of pre-European of the natives here? In other words, have you been able to preserve what the natives were like and traveled and managed to trade with each other and whatever else, pre-European?
There is, actually, going back probably past 1800s, it gets a little bit hard. The documentation that is out there, a lot of it's in the language. So by me bringing the language back to the people, I'm finding a lot of things, and it's starting to connect the dots. It's really cool. It's very informational, and, you know, once I get that all figured out, then I plan on sharing it with our elders, of course, and our youth and our community, and then, of course, by way of mouth, they're going to share with many people, you know. So, but there's there's some documentation out there, you know. We weren't blessed to have somebody like J.P. Harrington come through and document everything and have hours and hours of language, you know, documented. But we did have some people come through and do some pretty good work with our Native people. And of course, a lot of it was oral tradition, and some of it was passed on, some of it wasn't. But it's coming back.
I definitely do encourage to start with Cat Anderson and William Bauer, because they do talk about, you know, pre-contact culture and ecology and environment and medicine and plants.
All the questions are awesome. Before I take those, I just want to make sure everyone knows it's actually 8:03 and it's for 8 o'clock. So if you do need to be somewhere else, you know, it won't be viewed as being disrespectful if you need to leave. But I see a lot of people who don't look like they want to move. So I'll go ahead and answer the next question.
Do you help people have a creation story, and if so, where do you find that?
There's actually a lot of creation stories about all the animals, about how the stars came to be, how the flicker bird got his burnt wings, you know, how the mosquitoes came to be. There's a lot of creation stories out there, you know. There's a lot of good stuff out there, you know. It's to each his own what they choose, you know, how we got hands like the lizard, you know. There's a lot of stories out there, and like I mentioned, a lot of it's documented in English and it's in the language, but it comes out a lot more better in the language. It does, it does.
For Dr. Moreno, you mentioned the AIM movement, and I know that they took over Alcatraz Island for a year. I think it was 70, whatever that was. I had a couple of questions for you if you don't like that. We should talk to you. But first thing is, they took over the Mayflower at some point. They occupied it for a few days. You know about that? I think. But anyways, I've never seen a picture of it. But I understand. They took over Mount Rushmore for a couple of days. What else did they do in California? Did they do anything else in California?
So I want to say, so under the Fort Laramie Treaty,
right.
They were able to take over Alcatraz, and then they were removed by the state and the government. And so after Alcatraz, then it was the takeover of the BIA, and then going to Wounded Knee for 71 days. And so that's when there was more awareness to the conditions of American Indians throughout the United States and in the reservation.
Right. They didn't do any of the movements in California?
Well, in California, I would say, so the original idea, and feel free to chime in if you guys want to as well, the idea was to actually create an international art center at Alcatraz. And, you know, because of the removal, they weren't able to do that. I'm going to tell you that idea just came up again last year, right? It's like, old ideas get recycled. So, but the idea of DQ University, sort of, that was like the alternative. So, you know, the group was not able to successfully create that international art center, so then DQU was created, and that was like a whole night conversation of what happened to DQU. Yeah, so the AIM movement continues to a certain degree with members and have education, ongoing education. I would say the longest walk is part of what took place after the 1971 Wounded Knee incident. Yeah, but there are definitely books and documentaries on that history.
There's a question here, and then I'll get Maria back.
There's Stephanie. Stephanie, good. Over here too. All right, I have my.
Good evening, Dr. Moreno. I have a question for you. I think this is really great that what's happening here. My question is for you. I kind of have two questions. The first one is, it's great to learn the history, and it's great to, like, you know, lots of our kids don't remember, our grandparents aren't here anymore to talk about, you know, what life was like on Yaqui and Pima. and also my grandfather was Mayan. But my question is, in part of what you guys teach, is there a part of it that talks about really having these conversations in terms of our ways? Because they can learn the history, but what I think is respectful and what somebody else thinks is respectful is mostly not the same thing. And so they may be disrespecting, or I may be, and I don't know that. So you can learn history, but if we don't know like that way, you know, because that's our way and it's been an old way, and a lot of people want to learn the history, but they don't really understand our way. Is there something in your program that helps students, Native and non-Native? Because I know there's a lot of Native students that don't know, and we haven't been, you know, grandmas aren't around in the cities to raise like they raised me. My grandma raised me. So that's my first question. And my second question is, if you have Native students coming to this program and they decide they want to go up to, like, you know, get a higher degree, a PhD, is there something that actually prepares a Native student to actually take those steps? Because what I have noticed in my 57 years of life and helping young people get through college or whatever in terms of support is that I see a subtle colonization happening where they lose their own authority of who they are as a people, and they're reading something and they're saying, oh, this is the authority, and they remove their own authority, and by the time they thought they were going to get a PhD to go do something in the world, they end up being a professor because somewhere they disappeared in that, their spirit disappeared in that. So I'm just wondering if there's something that that talks about that, or that supports Native kids to actually get to PhD. I've seen a lot drop out because it takes the spirit away and they don't even know that that's what's happening. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, and I hope I understood them well. I think for the first one, what I try to do is emphasize the diversity within the state, and even within tribes, like for example Carlos mentioned, so within Mi-Wuk, the different regions where Mi-Wuks have history. And one of the things that I've learned from Diana Mendrades and Pam Gonzalez, who are the two elders who I try to connect my students to of that region, that if they can get grounded to the region, they start to learn that it's the ecology and the plants and the stories of the mountains and the rivers and the hills around that shape the culture. And then we start talking about, well, in other regions within California, outside of California, or in the hemisphere, like that diversity exists. So I tell them, listening is the most, political act you can do, because that's where you're going to learn the culture, or the etiquette, or the sensibilities. And especially, like you're saying, there are some that can't go to their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. For me, personally, I did become an ethnic studies professor because, yes, there were family members of mine that were captured, stolen, adopted, sold, and so my family tree is actually broken. And so that's how I turned to ethnic studies, and that's where Jack Forbes and others sort of became, my teachers. But it's really the elders outside of the university, outside of those colleges, that help you keep your spirit. So right now, the class that exists at my college, at Woodland Community College, it directly articulates with UC Davis. So they basically have their first introduction to Native study that articulates. But I don't know, and I know Stephanie was there, there is nothing at our college that specifically mentors or prepares Native or non-Native students to go into Native studies. I've had Native studies students that come through my courses, and then they'll transfer to UC Davis, or they'll transfer to some of the colleges in the Bay Area because of the activism, the Native activism. They'll get involved in the sacred sites movement specifically, or the Native artists community, and that's how they've sustain themselves. So I'm going to let Carlos, you want to?
Oh, I like that question. Something that's different from myself and my family, I believe, that is, who are they? Do they know who they are and where they come from? And what can them tools, bring for them in the future? I married a mighty woman, very strong, taught from her mother and their family for many generations, even before we were around. And that right there, I kind of hope that would give my kids a chance to have the similarities between both of our tribes, to know who we are and where they came from and where they're going. Now, things that my kids do, they're not really looking into having a PhD and stuff like that. They're looking to how to better themselves. Don't need all the knickknacks, all the things that all the other kids are doing. How to be a strong worker. Schooling's good, but I think our perspective on that is, yes, go to school, alcohol and drug free, all that good stuff, because it wasn't our way. But at the same time, my daughter, she's 17 years old, she wants to become a linguist, because she wants to know what's in these books that were documented from our grandmothers and our grandfathers for way before me, and my grandma's parents, and she wants to know what it means, because there's a lot of answers being told when we're starting to break this language down, and there's a lot of things that are coming our way, and sometimes people can handle it, sometimes they can't handle it because the medicine's too strong. When I grew up as a young man, I told my dad, said, what are you going to tell the cops if you tell them what you believe? And I said, Grandmother Earth, Father Sky, I believe in the animals, I believe in the trees. And he looked at me and he said, you're full of it. They're going to look at you and say, who are you? Because at one time, of course, Indian people weren't looked at as being somebody, like that. But you know what? I told myself, no, I'm going to stay with where my heart's true. And here I am. I don't have big education, but I have the motivation. As I look around, I see so many people that motivate me. And my grandmother was 88 years old, plus last year she had passed on since then. And that was my motivation, to not have to worry about our kids going to Indian schools and having to, be spanked, and to have hot pepper put in their mouth because they're speaking their mi-wuk. So I think to each his own, and to every family it's different. So I really can't speak for others, but I know that I can kind of help people. Like you said, you're helping people go to school, and that's very positive. But I know that my kids are different, and it's not different in a different way, or to be different, or to be on this pedestal or anything like that. Just to be homegrown, and to be, to know who you are, and I think that's most important. My daughter's 17, and if she wants to go to school, cool. But she's going to know and have all these set structures and guidelines and ways of our old ones, the old timers, that's going to allow her to do it. Whatever she needs to, have the tools she needs to do what she needs to do. And English is great, but it's everywhere. Let's do something there. Always say it in the language. Speak your language. So of course we can't do that here. Everybody be like, huh? What? What did you say? So it is what it is. But I like what you said, and I think to each his own. And as long as we continue to motivate them kids to do what, shoot for the sky, shoot for as far as they could go. And if they become doctors, we have native doctors out there. We have kids from our tribe that went to Dartmouth, so, and sometimes it's a financial burden. They didn't have the money, but because of some things that we do have as a tribe at Sakanimut, land of the soap fruit, Tuolumne Reservation, we've been able to send kids to schooling. And not everybody has that, but you know what? I'll help anybody that needs help, just because that's the Indian way. Hopefully that was
Because of the time, we are now like 20 minutes over. There was one last question back here.
I think she's trying to get rid of you.
There's one over. Please. On this girl. Please. I've been trying to.
Get busy.
No, I've been trying to ask this question for a while.
from what I could gather, this is for the whole panel, from what I could gather of the conversation, there's a lot more interconnectedness between tribes, you know, both within California and otherwise. And so my question to you is, has there been or is there any sort of movement towards a cultural equity or racial equity within the tribal system, both, you know, within California, but even moving down further south into, you know, Mexico and the Southwest, or even up into, you know, the Northwest? I ask because that's one of the things growing up as an Indigenous person. I actually was not able to get scholarships or what have you because I was not a recognized Native American. I'm a Mayan, so I'm not recognized Native American. So scholarships did not apply to me. So that's why I'm wondering if there's any movement within the tribes or the tribal community to bring equity culturally.
Thank you for that question. And there are several movements across the actual, like, multiple continents about this. There's a political movement of people, of activists of indigenous communities throughout Central America, especially in Brazil and areas that have incredible presence of, like, oil companies and missionaries coming in to kind of, you know, those who have been impacted by deforestation and pursuing the minerals in those areas. There's now this mass mobilization, and there's, I forget what it's called, but it's like a federal, I just recently learned about this like a month ago. In that area, it's like an intertribal connection between these indigenous groups. Before, you know, they were kind of like isolated and not really. There's that. I know that effort is taking place there, and then I'd like to give the example of what's happening with the Yosemite people, right? So there's many people who are practicing and who they're part of their homeland, and they're not federally recognized, and so all of the tribes around them are making effort to assist them in that process. That's great. And so Tuolumne Band people are helping the Yosemite Miwok people, and like recently we had fires, right? And there are posts that had to get evacuated. The tribes who had casinos opened up their doors and were giving places for people to stay. And so it's kind of depending on the area, on how strong those immediate connections are between tribes, that will occur. But then there are these pockets of people who definitely do not have that federal recognition status. And so I think there's an overall movement of people kind of joining together, but there are so many issues impacting Indian people today. You know, if you think about the mental health issues, housing issues, people are still relying on government commodities, like where I grew up. And so because we're fighting so many battles, we do find strength and connection and community, and I think that's why it's just a slower process across tribes. And it's probably like a local geographic area that's helping strengthen it or making it a little more difficult based on the tribe.
Right.
Either of you guys want to add to that?
I was just mentioning to Carlos that we're both aware that at Standing Rock there was a creation of, you know, schooling education that was about intertribal connections and sharing, and different tribal groups were assigned like a different day to be able to facilitate teaching and learning about that. And the Declaration Rights on Indigenous Peoples, which was approved not too long ago, just a few years ago, and the United States was the last nation on the planet to sign off on it. I mean, part of one of the tenets of that declaration actually says, you know, that there should be the right to create indigenous education for groups or intertribal as well.
Great.
There's a lot of different grants and things that are out there that a lot of people are getting, and more likely the people that are going to receive them are the federally recognized tribes. But at the same time, one of them is that TANF grant, and the TANF grant is allowing people to get some resources, some help, and some assistance. It doesn't assist everybody, but it helps out if you're a part of that household and you have linear descent or you have some sort of Indian blood, you know. I know it doesn't help everybody, but there's different resources out there, and I mean, you got to start somewhere to get somewhere, and so a little bit at a time is what it's all about, you know. And if we can, you know, the tribe up in Tuolumne helps out many different people in many different ways. You know, there was a time that we had people all the way from Ohlone country, you know, I mean, our people traveled all the way down to, you know, Pleasanton to meet with the Chochenyo and Lonely people, you know. So we did that a long time ago and helped each other out, and you know, we brought them acorn, and then in return they took us to get shellfish and abalone shell and trade stuff. That I'm sure we could do that today and figure out some sort of way or means to help each other. And like I said, it's the Indian way, and it's going to happen. It's inevitable because our people are starting to realize that, you know, there's a lot of things coming about, and you know, that's preservation of the land. You know, we're talking about droughts, we're talking about water, so we all have to, you know, exist with each other, you know. So there's a lot of different topics of discussion that are going to be coming about, and I'm sure, you know, it's based on plants and trees and the oxygen that we breathe, and there's a lot of things out there, and not all of us have the funding and the money to do it, but at the same time, there's somebody that might be there to share the knowledge that they have or gained in one of these symposiums or conferences or whatever it may be that can help somebody else out. I truly believe in that.
Thank you. I just want to add really quickly that the Intertribal Agricultural Council is supporting projects, collaborative projects across regions. So they'll do like Pacific region and then Mid and then Eastern region. But for example, they have a project, the Sacred Corn Project, and that's when they invited Mayan, Nawa people to go up to the Minnesota region and other regions to sort of come together as maize people, corn people, and have that interchange. So that is one possible organization that is supporting those connections around the connection of corn, and also Roberto Rodriguez from the University of Arizona. He's been doing a lot of that work around the corn people on both sides of the border. And then Devon Peña from the University of Washington too has been having those conversations about preserving corn on both sides of the area. I know corn doesn't grow here, but Southern California and Southwest.
It grows in Canada.
Well, thank you all so much for your attention and your questions. We're going to end this now, and I believe we can